Okay, everyone, let's talk about the Greeks, and ancient Greeks. Um, Pretty interesting place. This is really the first Western civilization that we're talking about in any significant detail. Ancient Greece. Ancient Greece is often called the one civilization or one society that is more influential of the other ancient societies on the heritage of the Western world. That is European civilization and the civilization that emerges particularly in North America, North and South America. That is ancient Greece is often looked to as the birthplace of Western civilization, although a lot of ideas that we've talked about that influenced the West came from parts of Asia and even Egypt into Africa. The Greeks, for instance, will be influenced by Egyptian art, for instance, early on in their civilization, and then they sort of branch out and depart from what the Egyptians do. So let's look at ancient Greece. Here's ancient Greece. You can see on the map, this is an important part, Peloponnesus, which is where Sparta is. It's also important, we'll see in the age of Homer. This is a region called Attica. That's where Athens is, Thebes is. Those are important city states. Corinth is an important city state, as you can see right here. Over here, this is Anatolia, or modern day Turkey, sometimes referred to as Asia Minor in the ancient world. That's where the city of Troy supposedly is located. This is where Ionian Greeks live. That is, people who speak Greek live all over the place, including the island of Crete here with its capital at Knossos, famous for an incredible palace that was once there. So we look at the Greeks. We look at this area. You've got the Aegean Sea, Sea of Crete. Ionian Sea is over here, even though Ionia is right there. There's Mount Olympus, where supposedly the gods live, Zeus and Hera and all those gods that interact with the Greeks in their daily lives on a mountain. That is, one of the things about Greece is that it's very much a divided region. You could see being a naval power is important, which is what Athens is going to be. Sparta is going to be the dominant Greek infantry power with their foot soldiers, although the Greeks also have, the Athenians also have a good infantry. It's divided. It's a divided realm. So it's not really a united country. It's divided. It's mountainous. And that leads to the development of sort of independent Greek city-states that we'll talk about. That is, Greek societies that aren't really united with each other, and they frequently go to war with each other. If we can get to the next slide, if I can work on this, some early Greek civilizations before the period when we talk about Athens and Sparta. Two early civilizations are the Minoans and Mycenaeans. The Minoans are on the island of Crete. That island, if you look at in the previous slide, Crete, here's where the Minoan civilization emerges. You can see it's an island, so it's a sea-based kingdom led by the legendary King Minos with his amazing palace at Knossos. I don't know if you're familiar with Greek mythology, but the story about Theseus and the Minotaur, we think, refers to the palace at Knossos. One of the interesting things about the Minoans, it's wealthy. We don't find a lot of military installations there or evidence that they were warlike, but we know they engaged in some degree of trade in the Mediterranean and the Aegean world. What's interesting about their religion is that goddesses were held in higher regard than sort of gods. So it's kind of interesting. A rival civilization that emerges that ultimately kind of defeats and conquers the Minoan civilization. So the Mycenaeans, if you've read your Homer, it's the Mycenaeans who are the Greeks of the Trojan, involved in the Trojan War. These are the Achaeans, the Mycenaeans. These are very much warriors. And if we go back, we can see Mycenae is in this part of the world later where Sparta develops. So it's a warrior culture. It's in the Mycenaeans where we begin to see the origins and beliefs in some of the Greek gods and goddesses that are later revered by the Greeks, like Zeus and Hera and Poseidon and those individuals. Number of cities there, you can see that at one time were run by Mycenae, by the Mycenaeans. Now, it's a civilization, and we don't know an incredible amount about these ancient civilizations. But we know they existed, and we get some stories from Homer. Later on, you can see the Iliad and the Odyssey are about the Trojan War and the aftermath of the Trojan War with the Odyssey and Odysseus. So those are wonderful, wonderful epics. Just like the Epic of Gilgamesh was an epic, that's a wonderful epic. But for some reason, the Mycenaeans and Minoan civilizations come to an end perhaps natural disasters, some other things. But it's around the same time, if you look at the time period, that the Egyptian Empire comes to an end and the Hittite Empire came to an end. There's something going on in the world at that time, the Mediterranean world, that's leading to the collapse of these societies. And in Greece, it ushers in a dark age of civilization where kind of literacy sort of vanishes. We don't know much about this over three centuries of history right there. There's not much writing. There are a few records of these civilizations. We believe that Greece itself was massively depopulated. Later population increased. They come out of the dark age. Its trade increases, and we begin to see the emergence of the Greece in the ancient Greece that people admire and learn about and study. We see the rise of people like aristocrats. These are powerful warriors, often military commanders. They're believed to be protected by the gods, and they're sort of the best men in society, the natural rulers in society. So they end up having special status within the military and in society as well. We get bits and pieces of this age, the Dark Age, from Homer, who is producing the Iliad and the Odyssey, we think, sometime at the end of the Dark Age. And it's not written down initially. It takes a while before the Odyssey and the Iliad are written down. It was passed down orally, Homer, and a lot of Greeks decided to memorize the Iliad as part of their education. The Iliad and the Odyssey also talk about these great warriors and the whole notion that the Greeks place on warfare and honor, the achievement of honor, that the most honorable thing you can do as a Greek is achieve, or the most honorable way for a Greek to die would be on the battlefield. That's how much they honor warfare. Honor becomes important to the Greeks. It's how you elevate your status, by doing honorable things. It's how you become one of these best men in society sometimes. So it's about the importance of honor in Greek society. Even for athletes, honoring athletes, important to the Greeks. Remember, we get the Olympic Games coming out of ancient Greece. Hesiod is a poet who's operating at that time. He writes the Theogony. That is, it tells the stories about all these Greek myths and how the gods and goddesses came about. You know, and if you've studied Greek mythology, you know that the gods, according to Greek religion, the gods very much are involved in daily affairs, and the gods are kind of like human beings. They're gods, they're immortal, but they're kind of like human beings and interact with human beings, doing some good things at times and some terrible things at times. After the Dark Age, we enter a period known as the Archaic Age, where we see the development of the Greek city-state, the polis. That's the basic political unit of Greece. Just like in America, we live in a country, the United States, a national state, a nation. The Greeks had a polis. That's a city-state. Those are independent cities, similar to sort of the independent city-states that emerged in Sumer when we talked about it. So the Greeks aren't united. They're divided into their own little cities and the land surrounding these cities as well. The cities tend to be walled, but includes the land adjacent to the cities as well. Also during the Archaic Age, the Greek literacy returns to the Greeks and to Greece as the Greeks adopt the Phoenician alphabet. And one of the things they do with the Phoenician alphabet is add vowels to this alphabet. And that's the Greek alphabet. If you look at college students and the Greek letters that they wear on some of their shirts and the fraternities and sororities, you'll be familiar with some of these, some aspects or some letters in the Greek alphabet. It's also a time period that Greece, the people in Greece, just, you know, things improve, life improves, standard of living improves, and the Greece themselves increase in population, dramatic population increase during the Archaic Age. And one of the responses to population increase is to take to the seas, take to the Aegean and take to the Mediterranean and establish sort of sister cities elsewhere along the coastline, along, you know, territories along the Aegean. The Greeks established city-states in southern Italy. They move into Turkey, they move into parts of southern Russia actually as well, and even into Spain. So they take to the seas. You have a metropolis, a mother city in Greece, and a daughter city elsewhere. One of those colonies. So colonial expansion occurs. And as I said, the basic political unit of the Greeks, of ancient Greece, is adopted at this time. a city-state, a city that it is its own independent political union, a city that is a nation, and it refers to the entire community of its citizens, the city-state. Generally speaking, they have a number of features like an acropolis, an elevated area, which is often where you have temples, an agora, which is a marketplace. I don't know if you've heard of the term agoraphobia, which is fear of outdoors. The agora is outdoors. It's a meeting place for people. It's a marketplace, and it's also where a lot of political activity occurs. And this city-state includes the citizens, and there also be slaves and others, and there's special types of citizens. One type of citizen will be hoplites, generally the men, of course. These are men who serve in the military. The hoplites are soldiers. And one of the things that happens is the Greek city-states rely on these hoplites tremendously to protect their own cities from others, because the Greeks often fight each other. So they rely on these hoplites who provide their own armor, their own helmets. You may have seen some of these hoplites in some movies, the Greek soldiers. And what these hoplites do is to begin to demand more political rights, because if they are fighting for the city-state, they demand more rights as citizens. And that's when we see these Greek city-states developing differently, progressing differently in terms of the political framework of the city-states. And if we look at some of these words down here, monarchy, aristocracy, oligarchy, tyranny, democracy, demos, the people, those are ways that Greek city-states are governed. That is, in a monarchy, that means the city-state was governed by monarchs, kings, queens, generally kings though. Aristocracy, that means the Greek city-states were controlled by particular elites within society, the patriarchs, the aristocrats, the nobles, those great men, men of wealth and status. Sometimes Greek city-states are ruled by oligarchs, that is an oligarchy, a rule of the few. It could be aristocrats and military leaders, and some maybe rich businessmen, just a few people run. Some city-states often have a powerful figure, a kind of populist leader, who seizes power illegally, that is, against the constitution or laws of that city-state. They seize power and establish a dictatorship. That's called a tyranny. Some of these tyrants are pretty popular because they do things for ordinary people. They give them jobs. They dispense with debts. So they're very popular at times with ordinary citizens unless they become too tyrannical. And what's interesting is sometimes these tyrants lead some Greek city-states into becoming democracies. That is, a democracy is a rule of the people, the demos, the people. When the people, the citizens, run the city-states. So let's look at this archaic Greece. Already talked about population. We see something interesting happening during Greece. One of the great heritages of Greece is their artistic accomplishments, their intellectual accomplishments, their cultural accomplishments. And during the Archaic Age, there are a number of different poets. One, Sappho, is a female poet who writes about her love for other women and for goddesses. Sappho was a famous poet at that time, female poet. This is also a time period when I mentioned the hoplites really begin to stress that the political system change and serve their interests in a better way. And this is how you see some reforms politically. The phalanx, by the way, is the formation that the hoplites fight in. They 8 across and 8 deep. But look at this. Here's the Mediterranean world. Here's a map of some of the colonization that occurs. You can see I mentioned they go into southern Russia, that time into the Black Sea. So the Greeks established colonies all over the place. One of the things about the aristocrats at that time, they show off their distinctiveness by the dwellings that they live in, the lifestyle that they lead, and the way they carry themselves, and of course their rule over other. Among the aristocracy, and later we see this translates into many of the Greeks, homosexuality is a common practice. For the Greeks, especially for some Greeks, they thought the love between men was greater than any love a man could have with a woman. It's not like they didn't have kids, they all had wives as well, but homosexuality was accepted and ordinary for a lot of the Greeks. One of the things about the aristocrats, they don't particularly get along with each other, and that's one of the reasons why you have a lot of infighting when tyrants take over and move Greece closer to democracy. Now, are some Greek city-states closer to democracy? Not a democracy, although a city with democratic elements in it, is the city-state of Sparta. I know We have a number of schools who call themselves Spartans to adopt the Spartan as their mascot. This is a warrior society. All Spartans ultimately become soldiers. All Spartan males become soldiers. They begin training at an early age, living most of their lives after this in the barracks, separated from women. Doesn't do a great deal for population increasing. But that's the way Spartan society develops. One of the things that happens, I mentioned the Archaic Age and colonization. For Sparta, the Spartans don't take to the seas and colonize or create another city along the Mediterranean. What the Spartans do is decide to conquer land within Greece, and they conquer Messenia. And the Messenians are going to be turned into Helots. Helots are slaves who were treated brutally. So Sparta conquers their neighbors and turns them into slaves. And the slaves are vastly outnumber the Spartans. So what happens is all Spartans essentially become soldiers so that they can control the population of slaves, because there are slave rebellions. Who wants to be a slave? And they're treated brutally as well. And the Spartans really trained brutally to become soldiers. That is, you are taught to endure pain, lots and lots of pain, psychological pain, as well as, of course, physical pain, so that when warfare comes, when you're put in a particular situation, like that Battle of Thermopylae that you may have seen in the movie 300, where the Persians in wave after wave are trying to get through this mountain pass and 300 Spartans fight to the death, they want you to be prepared for that sort of situation. Spartan moms tell their sons to hold on to that shield. Make sure you don't use that shield. You either come back holding that shield or your dead body comes back on top of that shield. That's the importance of being a warrior and a soldier. And these male citizens who become soldiers are Spartiates. They get their own their own assembly, and they get to initiate legislation. Spartan women, by the way, often segregated from men because men live in the barracks. Spartan women actually enjoy a great deal of freedom, or much more freedom compared to other women in ancient Greece, because Spartan women are free to carry on some of their own affairs. And they're also encouraged to engage in a number of physical activities so that they can remain physically fit, primarily so that they can produce healthy sons. You know, an unhealthy son is not someone that's not a child that's going to survive in Sparta. They'll get rid of that baby. So women, it's kind of an interesting situation with Sparta and Spartan women. You can see Sparta down here. This is in a region called the Peloponnesus. As a Spartan soldier, you can see that hat. You can see the shield. That's a hoplite, a Spartan soldier who fights in a phalanx. Let's look at, kind of jumped ahead with the slide there. Let's look at another city-state that develops very differently. One of the things about Sparta is it is a militarized society, a barrack society, and it doesn't really produce much else that survives. The cultural heritage, the intellectual heritage, the political heritage, the things people admire about ancient Greece come from Athens, and a few other city-states, but come from Athens. It's Athens that develops into the world's first democracy. The world's first democracy starts in Athens, takes a while to become a democracy, and then of course it ends in Athens after being democratic for a while, then disappears until the modern age. Athens is an agricultural society, we think once ruled by kings, but dominated by aristocrats around the time we're talking about. And it's an aristocrat by the name of Solon, the lawgiver, who is going to come along and sort of reorganize Athenian society. One of the things going on at that time is Athens has a really severe law code, a draconian code, because it's named after Draco, draconian code. Draconian means harsh. You know, there's a death penalty for all kinds of things. Another problem with Athens is that a number of its citizens are becoming slaves, because there is such a thing as debt slavery. If you cannot pay off your debt, you become a slave and you have to work for an incredible amount of time to pay off that debt. And at this time, around 594, there is a threat of essentially civil war. Ordinary Athenians are about to rebel against the Athenian rulers. So an aristocrat by the name of Solon comes along and reforms society, gets rid of debt slavery, abolishes it. He frees everybody enslaved from being in debt. So, and you can't go into debt. I mean, you can't become enslaved any longer, because you have debts. He promotes new agricultural ventures, new business ventures like growing grapes and olives, which become very profitable and help out a lot of small farmers. He creates new political institutions and judicial institutions that include more and more citizens. You know, various citizens can sit on juries, that is, court cases. There's a citizen assembly. It's still a society in which the wealthy have the most power, but it's changing. And it changes even more when aristocrats come along. A guy by the name of Pisistratus, who is a tyrant in 546, who has the support of the public. And what does he do? He gives things to the people who support him. They get cheap loans. He increases political power by giving more political rights to the demos. He kicks out of Athens a number of people he calls dangerous. That is, aristocrats who threaten his rule. So you can see Athenian society changing politically. And ultimately, around 508, there's this guy who appears by the name of Cleisthenes. And he is regarded as the founder of Athenian democracy because he reorganizes Athenian political districts. He basically creates what we would call voting districts in which the people have the right to vote. But it's also a true democracy, at least a true theoretical democracy, where America is a republic where we vote for people to hold office and run the government. Athenians didn't just vote for people, Athenian citizens. They also were required to hold office as well, hold some office as well, which is something we don't do in America. So you had a responsibility, a lot more responsibility as a citizen. Now, quite often, ordinary citizens wouldn't actually run for office or didn't want to. So there are ways around that. An interesting feature of this Athenian democracy is something known as ostracism. Ostracism, you ostracize someone, you shun them, you exclude them. And what ostracism does is that it's a policy whereby the citizens vote to kick out of Athens anyone they deem to be really dangerous. So it's kind of an interesting aspect to that. Another region, Ionia, is kind of important because we'll see that that's one of the reasons for the Greeks and the Persians to go to war. This is in Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. Anatolia. These are Greek city-states that emerged there. Miletus is one of them. One of the interesting things about this is where we look to for the origins of philosophy. Philosophy is not terribly popular today, but philosophical speculation is one of the things that sort of defines the Western tradition. And it's these Greek philosophers, primarily Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, who dominate the sort of framework that philosophers operate in the West. But before them came a group of philosophers known as the pre-Socratics, and I'll get to them a little later as well. The pre-Socratics, that means they're before Socrates. And what these pre-Socratics do is that their philosophy is engaged in sort of scientific speculation. That is, they try to look at the natural world and study the world around them to figure out how it works, how it operates, and what sort of ingredients, what sort of elements make up the natural world. It's not like they come up with correct answers that we accept today. It's the process they use. They look for reasons other than religious reasons or myths to explain why natural occurrences occur in the world. For instance, why do you have earthquakes? Is that because Poseidon caused earthquakes? Is it Zeus that causes lightning? No, they look for other explanations, natural explanations. Doesn't mean their answers are right. It's the process that we sort of recognize, the importance of trying to reach the truth without relying on religion. And so we sort of have that idea within science today to help us understand the world around us. Now, the Persian Wars occur because the Ionian Greeks are encouraged to rebel by the Athenians. Now, it's interesting because we're talking about some city-states and we're talking about Persia. As you remember, the Persians were the largest empire to date. And what do when the Ionian Greeks rebel against their rule? They annihilate them, they crush them, they defeat them, and then they go after Athens. They decide to invade Greece itself and punish the Athenians for encouraging the Ionian Greeks to rebel against Persian rule. Persian Emperor Darius invades, not with the strongest of Persian armies, and the Athenians, who had asked the Spartans for help, but the Spartans didn't help out, actually defeat the Persians at a battle, famous battle called the Battle of Marathon. You know, the marathon is an event in the Olympic Games. So it's interesting, the Greeks had already thought of themselves as superior to everyone else. There are Greeks and then there are barbarians. And here you have a city-state, Athens essentially, and a handful of allies, essentially defeating the largest empire to date. The Persians come back a decade later under Xerxes. And this is when Athens and Sparta unite. This is that famous battle where the 300 Spartans fight to the death to prevent that massive Persian army from invading Greece. You know, they are defeated, but it's the heroism that survives and is admired by many. So the Persians invade, and this time the Greeks are united. Athens, the dominant naval power in Greece, and Sparta, the dominant infantry power. And they defeat the Persians at a couple of battles, including major battles at Salamis and Plataea. So this mighty Persian Empire is defeated by the Greeks again. That's pretty impressive. And you can see Plataea, Salamis, the Battle of Marathon from the earlier invasion. Really impressive that the Greeks defeated the Persians. There's something called a trireme, which is one of the Greek naval vessels. Kind of interesting recreation of the Greek naval vessel as well. So the Persians are out. And what happens is you enter the classical age of Greece, particularly as it refers to Athens, not so much as it refers to Sparta, but as it refers to Athens. Athens becomes even more democratic under the leadership of a guy who was elected general, but repeatedly, a guy by the name of Pericles. Pericles, very popular, which is why, even though Athens is democratic, he's put in charge of Athens year after year after year after year. Why? He turns Athens into the showcase of Greece. There's a massive building program. And of course, you have to pay people to build this so people have jobs. The economy's good. He's unbelievably popular. This is when the Parthenon, one of the most famous religious temples ever, is built in Athens, the Parthenon on the Acropolis. A number of festivals held, festivals honoring Greek drama, honoring music, all sorts of festivals that the Greeks participate in and relish. So that makes Athens a place that the Athenians enjoy, and that's one of the reasons why they continue to support Pericles. Now, the Athens and Sparta do have a falling out. They go to war briefly and then sign a long peace treaty. Meanwhile, Athens organizes something called the Delian League, an alliance with other Greek city-states that it dominates, and it dominates the treasury, so it gets enormously wealthy, forcing other Greek city-states to contribute to the Delian League. You know, supposedly that league is designed to continue fighting the Persians. It makes Athens wealthy, and that's one of the reasons why Athens can build all the stuff it does. It dominates the treasury, so you can see his Delos, that island. Here are the Athenians as well, the Persian Empire. There's the Parthenon. It's been blown up a couple of times. There's a replica of the Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee, so you can put on your tight Wranglers and giant belt buckles and head out there and go see the Parthenon. Yeehaw, right? Athenian imperialism. One of the things we talked about that, the Delian League. Athens is very aggressive militarily, much more aggressive than Sparta, even though all Spartan males are soldiers, full-time soldiers. And it's Athenian aggression that leads to a major Greek civil war known as the Peloponnesian War, a war between Athens and Sparta. Greek's dominant naval power, Athens, versus its dominant infantry power, Sparta. It's a long war. It lasts 3 decades, almost 3 decades. There's a period of peace in the middle of it, in which there's no fighting, but then fighting resumes. Sparta invades Attica. That's the land where Athens is located, and tries to starve them out. A plague occurs. Pericles dies, but the Athenians hold on. The Athenians use their navy to attack Spartan strongholds, and then ultimately there's going to be a peace treaty that's signed in the middle of this Peloponnesian War, which gives about a decade of peace. And then the Athenians decide to end this civil war. To reignite the Peloponnesian War using their navy. And here you can see some of the major battles. Sparta over here, Athens over here. The Peloponnesian War is pretty brutal. There's an Athenian leader, self-serving Athenian leader by the name of Alcibiades, who attacks a Spartan stronghold or an ally of Sparta in Syracuse. Think of Syracuse, New York. No, here's Syracuse. It's over here, way over here in Italy, on Sicily. That's where Syracuse is. It doesn't go well for the Athenians. Meanwhile, the Spartans seek the support of Persia. Persia has a navy. So the Spartans enlist this Persian navy in the battle against Athens. And what they slowly begin to do is starve Athens into submission, surround Athens, don't let Athenians get enough food to eat, for instance. And they slowly begin to defeat the Athenians. The big battle is Aegisbus-Tomi. Spell that backwards, and ultimately Athens surrenders. The Persian War comes to an end. Sparta tries to dominate Greece at that time, so they hold on for a while. They fight with the Persians again. It's the ancient world. People are always fighting. Well, even today, people fight. Athens reemerges for a while. Then Thebes, another city, emerges. That is, you enter a period after the Peloponnesian War in which the Greeks slaughtered each other in a Greek civil war, the Peloponnesian War, in which various cities try to dominate ancient Greece. Neither of them can stay in power for a while. It weakens Greece. It weakens Greece quite a bit. And there's this territory to the north of Greece called Macedonia, who has a king by the name of Philip II, and he invades Greece. And at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338, defeats the Greeks and sort of unites Greece under his rule, a Macedonian, and begins to prepare the Greeks and the Macedonians to invade the Persian Empire and conquer the Persian Empire. He himself is going to be assassinated. Perhaps his son was involved. His son is Alexander. That is the Alexander the Great that we will talk about at another time. But let's look at this Greek heritage. One of the things I talked about is a lot of warfare. The Greeks like to fight each other. We don't admire the Greeks because they slaughter each other in battle. We admire the heroism of some of their soldiers, their fighting techniques, that sorts of thing. But it's the cultural, it's the intellectual legacy, it's the artistic legacy that's important. It's the philosophy that's important, because the Greeks decide, well, let's think about whatever we want and try to find answers to any questions that we want. That's a very dangerous thing in the ancient world, even into the modern age, because some of the answers you come up with might antagonize a lot of people, religious leaders and political leaders. And one of the things we admire about the Greeks is their amazing artistic accomplishment, the temples they build, the buildings they have, their artwork, like the Acropolis, where the Panathenaea, this festival every 4 years honoring Athena. The Acropolis has the temple, the Parthenon, honoring Athena, the patron goddess of Athens, of course. And so it's an amazing, amazing place. No other Greek city-state has that. They have festivals honoring Greek drama. One of the things about Greek drama is it emerges from the worship of a Greek god by the name of Dionysus. Dionysus is the god of wine in Roman world, because the Romans are going to adopt the Greek gods. That's the god Bacchus. There's a Mardi Gras parade, Bacchus, but Dionysus was the Greek version of that. He's the god of wine. He's a fertility god. He's young. So he's frequently drunk and he can't control himself because he's a fertility god. So ask your advisor what that means. But what's interesting is in the worship of Dionysus is that one of the ways to worship Dionysus is to go to a secluded area, get drunk, act wild, start acting as well, carrying out certain sort of skits you might have, acting like someone else, and you're drunk and you're in this frenzy. And one of the things they do is kill a goat and eat the raw flesh. That is, Dionysus is symbolized by a goat. And the goat song is Tragados. And so, by the way, that's communion, eating the raw flesh. They also drink the blood and worshiping Dionysus. You take the god within you. And out of this sort of weird sort of way of worshiping Dionysus, Greek tragedy emerges, that is, and we associate Greek tragedy with the word drama. This is where drama originates. And one of the interesting things is the worship of Dionysus was particularly important for women. A lot of women actually engaged in that sort of ritual. And there you can see the Acropolis in Athens with the Parthenon right up there. The arts, we already mentioned drama, the importance of emotion and human conflict. Just like the worship of Dionysus is very, very emotional, the importance of emotion. And it helps you understand conflicts in life, human aspects, human nature. I mean, think about that. We all love to watch a drama. watch some drama unfold, whether it's an actual drama or one of these reality shows where people are fighting with each other and causing a lot of drama. You know, people have a lot of drama in their lives. But we have these famous playwrights like Aeschylus, who wrote the Oresteia, with themes of betrayal and murder, and where he starts adding extra characters. And that's how you get drama. You keep adding more and more characters to this play. You've probably heard of Sophocles and his tragedies, Oedipus the King. You know, we're humans who make these terrible, terrible decisions in life and pay for it. That is, it's not the gods always controlling your destiny. You control your destiny. Euripides as well, with those characters who sort of bring disaster to their own lives. And you can see that the whole idea of some of these plays is that they're looking at human aspects that we can understand today. Do people today make poor decisions that bring some sort of harm to their own lives? And then there's Aristophanes. Not drama. He writes comedies. He writes comedic plays, satirizing all kinds of people, politicians, and all kinds of things about ancient Greece. The Greeks are admired for their pottery and their art, and here you can see the discus thrower here as they admire the human form. Some other aspects of Greece. Greek society at this time, when we look at Athens, Athens has over 300,000 people at its height, probably about 350,000. Most are not citizens. Citizens could be men only. And citizens had to be men. Women are there, but women's rights are very limited in Athens. In Sparta, women had more right to lead a public life, for instance, but not in Athens. Women are secluded to the home. And as you can see, this quote from an Athenian aristocrat who's encouraging men to marry young, but these are his thoughts about women. Prostitutes we have for pleasure, concubines for daily physical attendance, wives to bear us legitimate children, and to be our faithful housekeepers. It doesn't sound like this is a loving marriage, although that often occurred. Aristophanes wrote a play, Lysistrata, about sort of setting in the Peloponnesian War, and he wanted the war to end. So one of the things he does is the women go on strike, the wives go on strike, no sex with their husbands. That's the best way to keep these men from fighting each other, right? I don't know. Ask your advisor about that. But anyway, men, there's just like even today to some degree, there's a division of labor between men and women. But Athens and other Greek societies also had large numbers of slaves. Now, slavery was common all over the Greeks, but the interesting thing about slaves in ancient Greece, particularly Athens, is that they do have some rights, and they got paid as well. Another thing that emerges within ancient Greece is philosophical speculation. This intellectual revolution, philosophy, natural philosophy, a study of the world around you. I already mentioned that. These are a couple of the pre-Socratic thinkers, Thales, Heraclitus, trying to understand the world around them. In medicine, some advances in medicine, that is, why do you get sick? Did Zeus make you sick? No, Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, comes up with this idea that the body is composed of four humors, four substances, which are in harmony, in balance with each other when you're healthy. When you're sick, one of them is out of whack, maybe more than one. Too much blood, too much bile, black bile, yellow bile, too much phlegm, something like that. So we'll give you some sort of treatment. But the idea is that illnesses are caused by natural things in the world, not by you getting, or the gods getting angry with you. Now, Greek philosophy takes on a more ethical tone in the ancient world, particularly in Athens, when we look at three philosophers in particular: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates is the giant among them. He's the first recognized philosopher here. He is the teacher of Plato, and Plato taught Aristotle as well. And by the way, Aristotle was Alexander the Great's tutor. So anyway, for Socrates, what's important for Socrates is to question everything, How do we know what's true and virtuous and ethical? Well, we question everything. And through questioning, we come to a better understanding of what's true and virtuous, because the goal is to teach people to be more ethical, more virtuous. And if they are that way, they'll make better leaders, they'll make better citizens, that sort of thing. The problem with Socrates is he's always questioning things. That irritates a lot of people. The people in Athens condemn him to death for questioning their gods, questioning, not accepting religion faithfully, and for corrupting the youth. She's got to drink hemlock, a poison. Most of what we know about Socrates comes from the writing of Plato. And what's interesting about Plato is he comes up with his own framework about the world around us. He says basically there are really two worlds: an impermanent world and an eternal world, a material world and an immaterial world, or a spiritual world. That is, in this spiritual world, the eternal world, is where true reality exists. And the world around us is just a mere copy of truth and ideal forms that exist in this real world, this spiritual, immaterial world. It's kind of a framework you see that Christian philosophers adopt a little later on. Basically, the world around us is flawed because we don't understand true reality as it exists in the material world. In order to understand that true reality, understand what's truly virtuous, we need to study and think and contemplate the ideal forms that exist in the immaterial world, in the eternal world, the spiritual world. Understand them and apply particularly those ideal concepts to society to make it better, because he does want to make people more virtuous and ethical. He writes a number of things, including a book called The Republic, which is about the ideal form of government. What's the ideal form of government that leads to great virtue and harmony and stability? Well, it's a government run by philosopher kings. He's a philosopher. It kind of makes sense. His most famous student is Aristotle, and he goes beyond Plato. Aristotle has their encyclopedic interest, or Wikipedic interest, I guess we'd say today. He studies everything. There's nothing that he doesn't want to study. He studies just about everything. And he adds to all of these fields: ethics, logic, physics, a rudimentary scientific method. And part of what makes Aristotle important is that he differs from Plato, his teacher. He doesn't say that reality exists in this immaterial world that we need to contemplate and think about so that we can understand universal truths. No, reality exists in the material world, the world around us. That's the world we have to study the most to see what's best, to see what true virtue is. And he comes up with a couple of ideas. Excellence lies between the extremes. For instance, Plato said a government or a city-state should be run by philosopher kings. Now, the Greeks, remember, experimented with all kinds of different political forms: monarchy, oligarchy, and all that. What Aristotle says is the best form of government is between the extremes: rule of a monarch, one, and rule of the people, democracy. He's not a Democrat. He thinks ordinary people are too passionate and emotional to rule in an ethical manner. But that's where he is in life. You live a life between the extremes. Moderation is important. Also, in terms of his science, it's Aristotle who comes up with this idea of an earth-centered universe, and that is going to be the conception of the world in our solar system that comes along into the early modern period when Copernicus and Galileo changed that. Another thing for this class is that the Greeks invent the writing of history, not just writing about the past, but writing about the past without referencing the gods. It's not like you can say, well, the Athenians wanted Marathon because Zeus was on the side of Athenians. No, they'll explain why this happened in using their analysis of events that actually occurred without referencing the interactions of the gods and goddesses. Herodotus, he's called the father of history. History just means investigation. You may have seen the word herstory. History has no gender basis as far as I know. It just means investigation. It's not masculine. And he wrote about the Persian Wars. Thucydides is famous for his history of the Peloponnesian War. He basically blamed Athenian aggression, even though he's from Athens, Athenian aggression for causing the Peloponnesian War. Thucydides is really a better historian than Herodotus because he's one who checks his sources a lot more. And we'll stop right there.